This is one of my favorite Paul McCartney songs, Beatles, solo, Wings, whatever. And many of his fans agree. Even Paul himself said on many occasions that this is his favorite of all his post-Beatles songs. So why didn't he release the original studio version as a single? Maybe I'm Amazed, released April 17th, 1970 as part of the McCartney album and written and recorded by Paul McCartney. So it's 1970 and the Beatles are coming undone. Nothing is going right. There are allegations of selfishness and power tripping between Paul and John Lennon. George is fed up and everybody wants to blame Yoko. But Paul is moving on. He gets married and officially cuts ties with the Beatles. Still, Paul has to get his pain out, and his new wife Linda helps him. So he does what most songwriters do when they're in love. He writes a song dedicated to her. The two found out even before they got married that both of them were trapped. He with the Beatles, and Linda, an upper-middle-class photographer, wanted to be free of the constrictions of Park Avenue in Scarsdale. So he sits at his piano, and the song that would become Maybe I'm Amazed kind of works itself out. The song in most of his first solo album, McCartney, is recorded mostly in his kitchen, him playing all of the instruments, and Linda providing backup vocals. Maybe I'm Amazed is a personal song that allows Paul to get rid of a lot of tension related to the Beatles' legal disputes. But the original version was never released as a single. Now, one might think that the reason Paul decides not to release Maybe I'm Amazed is because the song was thought to be a gift to Linda. He thanks her for comforting him during a difficult time, and maybe he wants to keep the song as something special between him and her. But that really wasn't the case. You see, even though Maybe I'm Amazed was written immediately after the Beatles' breakup, it still gets included under the Lennon-McCartney publishing banner, Northern Songs, which the Beatles no longer have a piece of. Problem is, Paul is now a solo artist, and he doesn't want to share credit with John, especially at this point. But because of the original deal that they signed as the Beatles, Maybe I'm Amazed, as well as the other songs on Paul's solo album, get caught up in that contractual obligation. Paul absolutely hates this. He wants to break out and show the world that he's just as vibrant after the Beatles as he was with them. Nevertheless, when the album McCartney is released, DJs on both sides of the Atlantic recognize how brilliant Maybe I'm Amazed is and give it all kinds of airplay for years. And both Paul and Linda keep this in mind. Time passes, business matters between Paul and John get resolved. For the most part, the two men make up by the mid-70s. In 1976, Paul is on a U.S. tour with his band Wings, and one of the songs that they perform live is Maybe I'm Amazed. Satisfied with the performance of the song at Kansas City's Kemper Arena in late May of 1976, and realizing how popular the song has become, Paul releases that live version in February of 1977, and it peaks to number 10 on the U.S. Hot 100. It doesn't go gold or anything, but Paul would later say in multiple interviews that Maybe I'm Amazed is his favorite of his post-Beatles songs, studio or live. For me, it's definitely in the top 5, no doubt about it, regardless of which version. The lyrics are honest, they're heartfelt, you know they're coming from a genuine place, and I love both versions for different reasons. The studio cut, of course, is more raw, more intimate. I love Paul's piano playing, love the melodic things that Paul does with his voice. Linda provides a very tender backup vocal. It's more of a love letter than the live version. Live version runs longer, it's meatier, not necessarily better, just stronger in terms of instrumentation, largely because it's performed live. The guitar solos by Jimmy McCulloch are amazing. Plays the shit out of them. And Paul puts a lot into his vocals. Very soulful. I have to say, I think one of the reasons Paul releases the live version of Maybe I'm Amazed has to do with the monumental success of Peter Frampton's live album, Frampton Comes Alive, particularly the song Baby I Love Your Way. But it's just a guess. As I said, both the studio and live versions of Maybe I'm Amazed are equally great. And there's a time and place for me to play each of them depending on my mood. As far as the ownership of Maybe I'm Amazed, Paul was fortunately able to work out a deal where the song would be under his own publishing arm, MPL Communications, and simply has Sony ATV as an administrator of the song only. When it comes to the music business, you live and you learn. At any rate, it must have been difficult for Paul to perform Maybe I'm Amazed for the first time after Linda's passing. Maybe I'm Amazed by Paul McCartney.